on Thursday, March 11th, 2001, and we're going to call to order the Zoning Advisory Committee meeting. We'd like to welcome everyone here tonight and welcome everyone that is watching at home, and to remind everyone that there is still an opportunity to listen to today's presentation and still offer comment in real time. You can send those emails to zoning@washoeschools.net. We will receive those emails during the presentation. We will read them, and so that will actually be taken into discussion for today's record. So now we'll go ahead and move on to item 1.02, roll call, and I'd like to invite Vice Chair Kaylin Campbell.
All right. We'll start off with Natalie Geisels.
Present. Thanks for saying my name right.
No problem. Polly Boardman.
Present.
Malia Pupta is not able to join us today. Beth Smith.
Present.
Araceli Martinez.
Present.
Christine Hull.
Present.
Christy Essa.
Present.
Adriana Publico.
Here.
Kaylin Campbell, present. Kathleen Combs.
That might be an old list.
Okay. I'll just skip that one. Amy Howe.
Present.
Dallas Holsey.
Present.
And Christine Swanson.
All right, we'll mark Christine as absent. All right, now we're going to move on to item 1.03. This is public comment that is generally related to items not on today's agenda. So do we have any public comment outside of the agenda items that we have later today?
We do not.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and move on to item 1.04, action to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Polly Boardman, I move to adopt the agenda.
Is there a second?
Amy Howell, I'll second. Go ahead, Amy.
I'll second. Amy Howell.
Very good. Any discussion on the motion? Nope, seeing no discussion. All those in favor, put your mic on and say aye.
Sorry, this is Sarah. Could you just make sure there's no public comments on the agenda adoption?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? No? All right, all those in favor, please put your mic on and say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, we're going to move on to section 2. And our first item in 2.01 is the possible action to approve the minutes from November 19th, 2020 from our Zoning Advisory Committee meeting. This is an item for potential action. So if everyone could get out those minutes, presuming everyone has had the opportunity to take a look, are there any changes or comments that anyone noticed? No, I have a small one. Under 1.02, the second paragraph under roll call, I believe that that second line, when it says have been adapted by the Board of Trustees, should be have been adopted. That's a very minor change. So if anyone moves to make a motion to adopt the minutes, all you would have to say is that you move to adopt the minutes with the minor change that Beth Smith noted. So it's not like it needs to come back for another month. Do you guys agree with changing? Because I believe it's supposed to be adopted by the Board of Trustees. Yeah.
I agree.
Any other comment? No? Do we have any public comment on the meeting minutes?
We do not.
Okay, wonderful. Is anyone open to making a motion to adopt with that change?
Adriana Publico, for the record, I move to adopt the minutes of November 19th with the slight change noted by Beth Smith.
Thank you.
Polly Boardman, second.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carries. So now we're going to move on to tonight's main topic, item 2.02. Information and discussion of elementary school, middle school, and high school zoning boundaries in the Panther Valley and Sun Valley areas, including proposed zoning changes that could impact students attending Alice Smith Elementary School, William O'Brien Middle School, North Valleys High School, Esther Bennett Elementary School, Lois Allen Elementary School, Desert Skies Middle School, and the new Proctor R. Hug High School at Wild Creek. Something that I'd like to point out to the committee and to the public is that this item is only for information and discussion. That means that we would not be taking any action tonight. This is a continuation of a conversation that we've been having for a while now from last year. But out of respect for that time period and the fact that there's quite a bit here to cover, we would not be taking action tonight. That would be for future months should the item come back up. So this is just a conversation to bring it back up with the community and the committee. And on that note, we welcome Chief Facilities Officer Adam Searcy.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Adam Searcy with the School District Facilities Department. We have a brief presentation to go through this evening, very similar to what we presented in November at our public meeting, with a couple of additions. So right off the bat, we wanted to talk about the public outreach that has been associated with this meeting. As you can read here, a tremendous amount of mailers as well as individual handouts to the students who live in the potentially affected areas were distributed over the past couple of weeks. These are a couple of screenshots of the exact mailers. You can see in both English and Spanish, as well as links to the committee website and email address for an opportunity to provide public comment. So we also, social media press release just yesterday got a little bit of media attention. So just really wanted to highlight the efforts. This is, of course, in addition to just the required public meeting postings that are associated with all of our committee meetings, doing everything we can to communicate to our families through our school channels to make sure it's widely known that we'll be discussing this. So just kind of wanted to highlight that, as it was, it's keenly of interest to this committee and oftentimes has provided great value to our decision making. So, but moving into the content, these first couple of slides are really introductory to the area that we're going to be discussing. This is an identical slide to what we saw last month. These blue dots represent students. Of course, just to get your bearings, you've got North Valleys High School. And this is really the general area of Panther Valley that we're going to be discussing. And always like to reiterate our colors on these maps. The shaded colors represent middle school zones. The dark gold or brown lines represent existing high school zoning boundaries. And then it's hard to find them on this particular slide, but these blue lines represent existing elementary school boundaries. We'll see a lot more of that here in a minute. And it corresponding capacity and projected enrollment slide. These are the affected schools in question this evening. And these are the current and projected enrollments and capacities at all of these schools. We'll go through these vertical colored lines here on some of the impact slides, but this is really what we're here to discuss. And as you can see, some existing and ever increasing overcrowding and capacity issues at Alice Smith Elementary, O'Brien Middle, and North Valleys High School that we're looking to potentially relieve with some of the options here this evening. Okay, so this is really the same slide that we saw before, just with those student location dots removed. Again, getting your bearings with all of the existing school locations, course, a future elementary school parcel near Stead Elementary that we own, the school district owns and intends to build in the future. But again, just to get your bearings on the existing elementary, middle, and high school boundaries as they exist today. Again, existing conditions exhibited on slide 6, but wanted to give a brief nod to some of the known and planned residential developments within this area. A lot of growth in the North Valleys, existing and planned. These are incorporated into our enrollment projections, but it's always a pertinent part of the conversation to try to anticipate where and when these residential areas of growth will occur and how many students those residences will generate. Obviously, all contained within the Alice Smith, O'Brien, and North Valleys High School vertical zones. All right. Okay, here's just an aerial of the
Adam?
exact.
Sorry, could we go back to that other slide just for a point of clarification? Can we state what the SF and what the MF stand for?
Sure, great question. It's just single family and multifamily. So think of apartments or condos in the multifamily scenario, higher density, traditionally lower student per capita generation. You know, we've talked about before, we compile all of our data. It's, you know, usually students per capita, it's coming more out of a single family neighborhood, but that's all incorporated into our forecasts. Good question. Okay, and again, our last kind of introductory slide, this is just the same area in question with an aerial image. But I think if you're not familiar with the area, it's valuable to understand, you know, that there's a railroad track that kind of runs through this area. And of course, some rather circuitous roadway networks between Panther Valley on either side of the highway. And then also, of course, significant, you know, mountains and terrain out there that kind of break up the different valleys, always making things challenging for us. All right, so option 1, this is the same option that we presented and discussed in November. So I'll let you guys read the bullet points, but let's just dive into what that looks like. Again, we're looking at the Panther Valley area as outlined in this dashed red line. And these neighborhoods, including this spur off of West 7th Avenue, are all currently zoned for Alice Smith Elementary, O'Brien Middle, and North Valleys High School. And in this option 1, we were proposing to rezone all of these area students to Esther Bennett Elementary School in Sun Valley, Desert Skies Middle School at the north end of Sun Valley, and the new Proctor Hug High School in the Wild Creek area. Also in option 1, this area off of, this is known as Spectrum Boulevard. If you're familiar, there's the Emergency Operations Center. This is a cul-de-sac off of Dandini Boulevard and Parr exit here. So really any development, there are some apartments proposed for that area. We did some research with the city of Reno. Apparently the application that was submitted for that development has expired. It was, I believe, a 2018 application, and the applicant allowed allowed it to expire. So really there's no update on the status of that, but presumably it's further out than anticipated. At any rate, this being a cul-de-sac really lends itself towards being zoned elsewhere. It's not connected to these neighborhoods physically, nor will it ever be. So in this option, this area, there are no students living there currently, but in this option, it's proposed that this area would be rezoned instead to Allen Elementary School in Sun Valley and then the same middle school and high school vertical, Desert Skies and Hug High School. Okay, and this is
Adam,
yes.
Adriana Publico. So there are no students in that little Nevada shaped parcel that you were just talking about, but how many students are in the other area that you're proposing to rezone to Bennett, Desert Skies, and Hug? Maybe it'll come up later on the capacity chart. I was just curious.
Yeah, we'll do the math and on the capacity chart, or maybe I can phone a friend with Mr. Baxley if he's got those numbers handy and can chime in or send me a message. I don't have them in my head currently, but we'll get, let me get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Adam, this is Christy S. I just had a quick question. When was the proposed secondary elementary school, the one that was, I think it had a like gold dollar you had stated near Alice Smith? There was another elementary school that Washoe County owned. When was that proposed to be started construction on?
Yeah, let me flip back to that slide just so everybody's on the same page here. Christy, I believe you were referring to this little guy. This
Yeah, that
road
was the one.
called Silver Dollar Road, so it definitely has not been named yet, although I'm kind of partial. I think that would have a nice ring to it. This is an elementary school parcel in a residential development that the school district owns, and it is likely to be in the second half of the 2020s. You know, everything's growth dependent. At this point in time, we have some available capacity, or will have more available capacity when O'Brien Middle School reopens new in 2022 at the existing elementaries in both Stead, Desert Heights, Lemon Valley. So this one, you know, it's not certain, somewhere in the 2026 to 2029 timeframe, something like that. But it's a parcel that we own, and so we prefer to show those explicitly rather than sometimes it's, here's a large development that's in the future and we anticipate, you know, building a school there someday. It's more nebulous. This one's more specific, but that's unfortunately about as specific as I can be.
Thank you.
Of course. Let's see. We were here. I just wanted to highlight that this is North Virginia Street, really up to here, and then technically Virginia Street peels off, and then this is kind of the on-ramp to 395. It's where this line's drawn, and this is really just the back of the subdivision here.
Oh, can we go back to that, Adam? So there's no connectivity above and below this red dashed line between those two neighborhoods, if those are two different subdivisions? Is that what you're saying?
No, I guess I wanted to just highlight that this line is being drawn to encompass this entire neighborhood. There is, importantly, there is a road connecting these areas, these subdivisions.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Okay. All right, so same exhibit, same boundary lines, just without the dots shown here. So everybody has their bearings. We're also going to highlight the transportation impacts on each of these slides. You know, there are a lot of factors that we consider when we look at these potential zoning changes. Obviously, capacity utilization, enrollment, overcrowding, things like that are maybe front of mind. There are a lot of other factors. Transportation is also included. So at the elementary school level, one additional bus route would be required versus the existing conditions. And really that has to do, you know, there would be buses that normally serve Alice Smith that would serve Bennett in this scenario in the future. But because of the way this particular line is drawn along Virginia Street, the neighborhood just on the other side of Virginia Street is currently serviced with the same bus. So these students right in here these students are served with the same bus as the students on the other side of Virginia Street right now. And so by putting these students on either side at different destinations, that's what triggers the additional bus. So talking through this with transportation in more detail over the last month or two, clarified that piece of information, wanted to highlight that at the elementary school level. It's not the same situation at middle school. And in fact, we can essentially just move 2 buses that grab those kids and take them to O'Brien now. Same buses would take those students to Desert Skies in this scenario. And then the high school level, all of the options will look the same at middle school and high school tonight, because some of the proposed areas are currently within the 3-mile walk zone of North Valley's high school. In this scenario, they would not be within the walk zone to Proctor Hug at Wild Creek, and therefore there would be a bus route that would need to be added at the high school level to accommodate those students. Okay. All right.
Oh, one question. So that bus for the Upper Panther Valley and Ladera Ranch area, would those kids be bused past North Valley's high school to Hug at Wild Creek? Because that was a comment that we got that surprised me. But do you know the route?
So you were asking about this Ladera Ranch area, and let's look at this slide for a second. So this is like the Ladera Ranch area. There's a couple different ways to get to Proctor Hug from here. You could either take Golden Valley out past North Valleys back to the freeway and down, or perhaps more likely down West 7th Avenue into Sun Valley, down Sun Valley Boulevard to the Proctor Hug High School that direction. So that's likely how these guys would flow. These neighborhoods here, as I mentioned, this has a roadway connection from Panther Valley. You could either hop on the freeway, jump up to Golden Valley Road and access anything up here. That's what they do now, I guess. To get to Sun Valley from this area, you're either going through this neighborhood to Golden Valley Road up and over West 7th Avenue into Sun Valley, or you're going down Virginia Street or on the freeway to either, not likely that they would get off at Parr and take Dandini, but rather to, what is it? McCarran.
Audie.
Yeah.
Karen?
And coming back up Sun Valley Boulevard that way. So it is a challenge. This Panther Valley is not well connected. It's not really even that convenient to get to Alice Smith, O'Brien, and North Valleys, to be honest. So, in all fairness, we wanted to highlight this reality. But there are multiple routes. The public comment you were referring to that we received did talk about the topography as well. It's a little hilly. It can be challenging. We do have buses that go on this West 7th Avenue currently, actually, to pick up these Ladera Ranch kids, take them to middle school as well right now. So there's a variety of routes, but it would be a change and add a couple of bus routes in this scenario.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were on slide 12 looking at the projected enrollment impacts. So hopefully you guys have the original screen. We've got slide 4 with the previous impacts, and then now these are the current impacts on slide 12. These are the current conditions on slide 12, and the projected impacts of this option are on slide 13. So as you can see, significant amount of enrollment relief to Alice Smith, O'Brien, and North Valleys, readily absorbed by Allen, or Bennett rather, primarily, and Desert Skies, and the new hug at Wild Creek also having adequate capacity to absorb those impacts by this option. So wanted to just touch on these colored vertical lines really quickly. I mentioned them at the onset. You can see the notes down below kind of describing these, but just visually here in the 21-22 school year, you'll see some impacts at O'Brien based on recent zoning changes this committee recommended, as well as the elevation of sixth graders from Stead Elementary up to O'Brien Middle School. That's why this purple line's here. The start of the 22-23 school year, this blue line is indicative of this option. All of the options this evening are proposed to go into effect potentially at the start of the 22-23 school year. And so that's where you would see this significant enrollment relief at Alice Smith as a result of this option. You'll also see these numbers change for O'Brien as it's anticipated 22-23 school year. We will reopen O'Brien with a larger new school at a capacity of 1,400 students. You would also see some enrollment relief. So that's all baked into this number, even though this number is going up. We're elevating sixth graders at that same time, but that's why this number, the percentage is going down, because we're considering a new school at that time. The red impacts, yeah, that's associated with the opening of the new Proctor Hug High School at Wild Creek. So this is kind of a combo impact here. And then the green, 23-24, is the opening of the Debbie Smith CTE Academy at the old existing Hug campus. We've talked about that previously with the committee as well. So just important for everybody to remind what all of these vertical lines are intended to indicate, how these impacts are cascading through time and reflected in all of our numbers. Okay. Any questions on option one? Again, this is what the same option that we looked at last year, or it was last year, last November. I did get some feedback on the total enrollment counts. I don't know if anybody's been doing the math in their head at home, but I've got 136 elementary school students, 87 middle school students, and 113 high school students currently living in the potentially impacted areas. Okay, so moving on to option two. This one has a little bit of a change. Basically, we're looking at US 395 in this scenario as the primary boundary to rezone these students differently. Slide 15 is illustrating that. This is 395 major highway splitting Panther Valley into two sides. So in this scenario, all of the students on the east side of 395 would be zoned to Bennett, Desert Skies, and Hug, as was proposed in option one. However, all the students on the other side of 395 would be proposed to go to Allen Elementary, Desert Skies, and Hug, just as this area off of Spectrum Boulevard in option one was proposed to go to Allen, Desert Skies, and Hug. So just a little something different for the purposes of discussion and consideration. The same proposed rezone boundaries here depicted on a graphic without the student geolocations. The transportation impacts are also the same. An additional bus required at the elementary school level. Middle school impacts are neutral. And then with this same high school impact, some students that are currently within the walk zone for North Valleys High School would have to be provided transportation to Proctor Hug. And okay, this is the existing conditions. Once again, always like to flip back and forth between existing and proposed on slide 19. The impacts are relatively similar. We're still moving the same areas, just at the elementary school level, a few more kids to Allen than Bennett in comparison to option one. Okay, so that's option two. Again, just something different for discussion, trying to look at this as many different ways as possible and give you guys some quality options to consider. And option three for this evening, again, takes the same area into consideration, but we're trying to add that area on the other side of Virginia Street that is triggering that additional bus route at the elementary school level. Yeah, so slide 21 shows that a little more clearly. Previously, I talked about this neighborhood right off of Virginia Street as you begin to climb up out of really the Truckee Meadows. And incorporating, instead of drawing the line on Virginia Street here, as we did in option one and really option two as well, moving this proposed boundary as is shown here, grabbing these kids, it allows the transportation impacts to remain neutral here at the elementary school level, grabbing these same students with the same bus that currently takes them to Alice Smith, and instead taking these students to Bennett, as well as all of the other students on the other side of 395 proposed to go to Bennett, Desert Skies, and Hug High School in this option three. And then again, this dead end cul-de-sac off of Spectrum Boulevard, if there are ever students living off of there, we would propose they go to Allen because of their lack of connectivity up to the north end of Sun Valley. Make more sense to send them to Allen, and then Desert Skies and Hug with the rest of them. Okay, so this is option three, looking at it without the student dots on there. You can see the same zoning boundaries proposed on this exhibit, page 22. As I mentioned, this one, going through it in more detail with the transportation department, discovered that if we incorporated those kids on the other side of Virginia Street, we could actually transport these kids a little more efficiently to their zone schools, but can't avoid that impact at the high school level. Here are the existing and proposed enrollment numbers based on the current conditions, and slide 25, the impact data associated with this option three. Really, these slides, almost negligible differences. We're rezoning a significant number of students from Alice Smith, O'Brien, and North Valleys, currently overcrowded and projected to grow considerably, and moving those to Allen, Bennett, Desert Skies, and Hug High School, all of whom can absorb the additional enrollments. Okay. So those are the three options that we wanted to present for discussion and consideration tonight. Be happy to go back through them and answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. Just a couple things before we get started with our discussion. First, for anyone that's watching tonight at home, you are welcome to email comments in real time that we will receive and we will read during this discussion. And that email address is zoning@washoeschools.net. So you can absolutely still be a part of tonight's conversation. Moving on from that, just a couple points that I wanted to make for the record and also for clarification. The Hug opening in 22, these newly rezoned students, if an action were to be taken at some point, would allow those students to open the new high school. So they would not join a high school that was already open. They would be a part of creating that new community and that new school, correct?
That's correct. The new Proctor Hug at Wild Creek is on schedule to open August 2022.
Okay. And then the other point that I want to make from our previous experiences with discussing potential high school changes, Lauren, feel free to check me on this, but I want the community to know that in the cases of a high school rezoning, it's my understanding that incoming juniors and seniors have the one-time option to decide whether or not to stay at their school of origin. So that's the school that they were originally zoned for, although there is not transportation that comes along with it, they are able to stay at the school, or they can make the decision to move over to the newly zoned school. And that's an option exclusively offered to juniors and seniors automatically. That's not to say that other variances for other students at other levels is not a possibility, but for incoming juniors and seniors, that is a guaranteed option. Is that correct?
Correct. They would have to apply for a grandfather variance, which is automatically approved. And also for Alice Smith, it would be the upcoming 5th grade students who would qualify for a grandfather variance. And same with O'Brien, the upcoming 8th graders would qualify for a grandfather variance, but no transportation would be provided with the grandfather variance.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So on that note, committee, let's talk about it. What are the aspects of these options you like? What do you see? What are you thinking?
Hi, Christy Essa. I just had I was looking at the map and I noticed that it was very much north. I really wanted to see what the numbers are, if we can get them, for Trainer and Sparks middle schools that are just directly south on those maps, just so I can get an idea of what's going on there as well. It seems it's very much, the map is very much cut and we're always just looking at the north side. I just kind of want a little peek down south to see what's going on down there, if that's possible.
Okay, sorry, just for reference, the light blue here
Okay,
is Clayton Middle School.
all right.
I believe the green here is Trainer and the orange is Sparks Middle School zones.
Okay.
Somebody correct me if I'm wrong there, but you know,
No, that looks correct, Adam. That looks correct.
Yeah, we've gone through those schools and been able to provide them with some pretty good enrollment relief in past zoning committee work, mostly associated with the Desert Skies Middle School opening. So while I don't have the numbers handy, I feel confident saying that the enrollment levels at those schools are at a very healthy level right now.
Okay, and the only other question I wanted to know is the students that are in these proposed areas that had walking distance to the high school and now are not going to have walking distance, what is the distance difference? If it takes, 20 minutes to walk 3 miles, well, that would be very fast paced, but if it takes 20 minutes to walk 3 miles, what is the new on bus going to take them to get to the new high school, the new elementary school? Do we know what the transportation times are going to be?
Well, so just for clarification, the students proposed that the elementary and middle school levels are outside of the walk zone. They're provided transportation currently, and they would be in all 3 of these proposed options as well. It's only at the high school level where some of these students, if you can imagine basically a 3-mile radius out from North Valley's high school, some of these students right here are technically inside of the 3-mile high school walk zone. And down here at Hug High School, approximately where the new Hug High School is greater than 3 miles. So they would be provided transportation here. I don't have a specific, duration, but I think many of us could estimate just having driven those areas before. I don't know what the ridership would be, this is quite a hike. So I don't suspect many of them are actually walking, but we're also not providing them transportation. While it might cost the school district additional funds to provide that additional route, I would argue they might appreciate the opportunity to catch a ride from the school district in this scenario, but that's, not my commentary. I'm here to point out the fact that this option, all of these options take students who technically are within the walk zone and taking them out of the walk zone at the high school level only.
I would just hate to see students that currently had, as I said, a 20-minute walk be put on a 45-minute bus ride. That would be my biggest concern.
Yeah, and I mean, just for context, that is a valid concern. That's why we're highlighting that aspect of this proposal. And the counterpoint, or the other consideration, really is the numbers at the high school and North Valley's in the first place. So while it's not ideal, a big part of the reason for bringing this proposal forward in the first place is the existing and growing overcrowding at North Valley's high school. So challenging solutions challenging problems like we always have at this committee, but trying to look at some options to try to relieve that.
This is Christine Hull for the record. In looking at all of them, regardless, it seems that North Valley's and then eventually the new Hug High School will both wind up being in the not great percentages, right? I mean, it's still leaving North Valley's at overcrowded regardless. And, by the time we get, into the late 20s, we're seeing the new Hug High School being in the high 90s. So I know you have all the plans for the proposals, but will we wind up needing to rezone these students again? Because now Hug will be full and another high school will be built somewhere on the north end of town. And I know we can't for sure know that, but is there plans, are there plans for another high school somewhere on the north end of town that would alleviate the overcrowding now in two schools?
Yeah, so as a part of our 20-year facilities master plan, we do have a new high school forecasted for the Cold Springs area. There's actually many thousands of new homes proposed and under construction in the North Valleys, including particularly in Cold Springs area. The existing and future overcrowding at North Valley's high school, that's our ultimate enrollment solution for that. Whether or not these students potentially are rezoned back is something, we couldn't really predict. I would say that Hug High School at Wild Creek will have an enrollment zone that is entirely built out or almost entirely built out. There's not significant growth forecasted beyond.
Okay.
It's kind of just a variation, or
yeah, no, that makes sense. There's no more room for growth. It's already built. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, eventually, perhaps also within this decade, we anticipate opening a new high school in Cold Springs, which will dramatically change the high school situation, and will definitely have to be revisited again. But
okay, that helps. Thank you.
You bet.
I think I think obviously a priority is giving some relief to North Valleys as well, though. So I really appreciate all these plans, because I know just like it was at Spanish Springs, the setup of that school and Damani, those hallways are very crowded, and it makes for a really tough educational setting. So I appreciate all of these ideas.
So I agree with Christine in that all of these options are better than the status quo. They relieve overcrowding at Alice Smith and O'Brien, and to some extent, the overcrowding at North Valleys. And the options are very similar, and the challenge or the drawbacks are similar as well. You know, you're going to have transportation implications and costs at the high school level, no matter what. So I think it's just teasing out the differences, because I think it would make sense to make a recommendation to the board with one of these three options, or another one if we think that there's another way to draw the line that would be better. But without much public comment, it's really hard to decide among these three options and how it impacts the families in these specific little pockets in these neighborhoods that I personally am not very familiar with. So I don't know how it really impacts people. And that's hard for me to say that this one's better than the other, because we don't have a whole lot of information.
On that note, Adriana, I'm going to pause, and can we call into record? I know we received one public comment. I don't know if we've received any additional public comment.
The committee has received public comment from Ken Rackley, and I have forwarded an additional public comment from Ken Rackley.
And we also have one other public comment that came in prior to the meeting, correct?
No, just the two.
Just the two.
So thanks for watching, Ken. And I guess the busing thing, it still confuses me, because a 3-mile walk is about a 60-minute walk, honestly. And I can't tell you that that's a shorter travel time, assuming that you're even doing that on foot, than taking a bus to Hug from one of these neighborhoods. So it's just not very clear to me. In last year, some of the discussions we had, transportation was able to provide trajectories of where the buses would go on a map. And then based on distance, we could kind of estimate what was longer, what was shorter, what made sense. I don't know that it's super important for this discussion, but it's something to consider, that a 3-mile walk might be longer than a 10-mile bus ride.
Mm-hmm. And also to orient the committee, because this item is only for discussion, there's no discussion around an action tonight. So what we're really aiming to do is to provide Adam and the team in the district our initial thoughts about the suitability with continuing a conversation with these options. If there are ideas or preferences that we have, of course, we don't dictate what the options look like, but we can certainly suggest ideas that they can take into consideration as they review options. And so really we're just talking through the thoughts that we have on this and discussing the suitability of moving forward with the conversation based on the information we have now. And Adriana, I hear you about the public comment. We are used to normally having more public comment. However, in the 4 years of the committee, it's also not entirely unusual to also not get public comment as well. I know that the district has done quite a few things to try to gain comment from this community. I share the preference that there would be more feedback, but it's also not unheard of. We have plenty of decisions that have been made in the past in communities that don't really share a lot of their thoughts. They're not required to, and oftentimes we have made decisions based on very little public comment. But I want to be clear that I share your preference to have more, but I do recognize the extent that we've taken as a committee and as a district in order to engage that comment. Although that's of course in addition to the 2 comments that we have received, which we do appreciate. So committee, any of the other things that you see or that jump out at you when you look at these options?
Christy Essa. Oh, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
Caitlin, go ahead. I was just going to say, I went on Google Maps and it is an 11-minute drive from Ladera Ranch to Hug. It's 5.3 miles per Google Maps. So there's that.
Thanks for doing that.
Is that the new Hug or is that the current Hug High School on your map?
That's a really good question. Let me check.
Just because there is a bit of a difference. I would say that's probably another 5 miles potentially. But it still sounds like what Adriana was saying, if any of those students are actually walking, and it sounds like that could actually be a pretty long walk for some. And so maybe it's not, maybe this actually gives them more time during the day, right? I don't know. But I agree with Adriana that I would really love if transportation could give us that estimate that they had in the past. That was really, really helpful for us, especially for the elementary kids, just to kind of know what this looks like as an impact on their day. And maybe that would help us, I'm not sure. And I know in the past, we've also talked about specifically for elementary school students, the path that it would take for parents to drop off for before and after school and what that would require of them. I know that was a big conversation in North Valleys when we did the northern part of North Valleys, because if we had them going north and then they had to come south for work, that was a pretty big trip. So I wouldn't mind if we could, when we talk about this again next time, have a little bit more information from transportation as to what that might look like. I think that would be really helpful.
I think so. Given the options, do you think the bus stuff matters as much? I mean, if we need to relieve schools, we don't really have options from other places where we would be evaluating like we did in North Valleys. I mean, there it made sense because we kind of had like all these different ways, but our three options are like, these are the areas that need to move down. And I don't really know, would the bus thing really matter with our decisions? I mean, I think it's fine to do it. I was just wondering what it would add for, I mean, because we got to like alleviate the schools, right? So what are we going to do with that? I don't know. I also wonder if, since the W. Smith Academy is more north, that there might be more enrollment at that CTE Academy than there are maybe at the AACT that's right now. So there might be a little bit more relief for North Valleys and Hug out of that school too, maybe is an option.
Adam, I had a quick question for you. In option number 3, are we getting the most amount of students to Desert Skies and Hug out of the 3 options?
That's correct. That option 3 moves the line slightly further across Virginia Street. So we're actually zoning a few additional students. I don't have those numbers. It's not a large number, but
it's 7.
Oh, it's just 7 kids.
Yeah. There's a few more in option 3.
Yeah, I was going to make the comment that I think it's positive to move as many kids into our new schools, our new facilities as we can. I work at Desert Skies Middle School, and the kids have a really great place to go, and getting, that brand new facilities, brand new stuff that we have at a new school is really cool. And so I think that's a benefit towards moving as many kids into those new schools as we can.
And on that note, we have some additional public comment that is going to be coming into your inboxes. And while we wait for that, I noticed Araceli was going to make a comment.
I actually had a question just based off of the 3 scenarios. North Valleys is still going to be not totally relieved. Is Washoe County School District maybe looking into what else or how else, maybe temporarily, I know we've done this at other schools, how we might assist and help with the numbers, even if it's just temporary structures? Or has there been talk about any of that?
Yeah, North Valleys High School currently has, I believe, 4 portable classroom units on campus. There's always potential to add to that. I want to say Reed, McQueen, and Spanish Springs all have 1 or 2 more than 4. It's not ideal, but that would certainly help the situation temporarily. Geographically, I think it would be a challenge to rezone any additional students out of North Valleys High School zone, just where the school itself exists within its enrollment boundary relative to any other high schools. This is about the limit that we could relieve the overcrowding through rezoning. So after those 2 options are exhausted, we need to build some permanent relief or permanent additional capacity, which is what I mentioned earlier as far as a new high school in the Cold Springs area, which is very much in our mid-range facilities plans.
Okay, well, I was just asking because in all three plans is still not totally or not even close to being relieved. So I don't know, maybe that might be a possibility in terms of keeping those students there in one of the best three scenarios, but ensuring that they have additional assistance with that temporarily until the other new school is built.
It's very much on our radar. The growth in the North Valleys is something we're reassessing multiple times a year. And, we also will have the ability to accelerate the construction of that new high school should the enrollment demand develop a little bit faster than anticipated.
Do we own that property, Adam?
We do not at this time. We have an agreement with the developers from Stonegate, as it's known, the large master plan community up there, with the intent to master plan a high school into their overall community. But at this time, they have not broken ground. We do not own a parcel in Cold Springs just yet.
I know I have a question. Is the walk times, is there different walk times between middle school, high school, and elementary school? Like high school is allowed to walk 3 miles and.
There is. Great question. It's 1, 2, and 3, or 1 1/4, 2 1/4, and 3. Elementary, middle, and high. Those are distances. So, and they have a program. It's not a circle. It's you trace the safe route along the sidewalk and whatnot. But yeah, great question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And on that note, I'd like to thank Sandy for sending in the comment. And if anyone would still like to send in comment, you're more than welcome to do so at zoning@washoeschools.net.
So that public comment we just received is from a mother who has kids who go to North Valleys, that live in that upper area, that walk to school now. It's way less than an hour, she says. And that's really tough because all the public comment we've gotten is focusing on that upper area and in high school. And that's part of all three proposed options. So I don't know if there's a way to, I don't want to create any split feeders where we take kids to elementary and middle for, one vertical and then shift them over to a different high school for, the last 4 years of their career with us. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it may not be a full hour, and that point is definitely well taken. But I can't imagine that it's a 15-minute or 20-minute walk either for a full nearly 3 miles. I'm sure based on where everyone lives, there's going to be slight variations, and the weather as well too. The points are definitely well taken.
Does the North Valleys High School have any additional real estate? Meaning, does it have room? And I know this has not been brought up, but I know some places like McQueen High School and Reno High School, they have temporary buildings that have expanded their capacity. And I just don't know how large is the area of North Valleys. Has that been considered?
Yeah, so North Valleys High School is a similar model to Damani Ranch High School. And some of you may remember in 2017, 2018, we actually constructed a permanent addition to North Valley or Damani Ranch High School. So that addition has already been constructed onto North Valleys High School. Basically, the permanent structure of North Valleys High School is completed. It's built out. The enrollment projections that we show, I'll just share my screen again briefly here as an example. These additional temporary numbers, this column in red, represent portable classrooms, kind of like what you mentioned at many of our existing high schools. So they usually, the portable classrooms, the portable structures are usually 2 classrooms of 25 students each. So 50 students per building. So that number of 200 represents 4 buildings or 4 portables on that campus. We could put more on that campus, but that would be cozy. You know, there's not a whole bunch of extra space, but it could always be done and potentially will be done before we build a new high school up there. But the point I wanted to make on this is that the additional temporary capacity is not factored into these percentages. The reason being, you know, they may provide additional classrooms for the school to use, but they don't provide additional parking lot space, cafeteria space, gymnasium space, music room space, things that the students need in addition to classrooms. So we note that these additional classrooms are available on the campus, but when we consider this school to be at 2282 base capacity with 2,300 total students there, that's over 100% capacity. That does not count the potential capacity of 200 students of a temporary nature, if that makes sense.
We have another comment. If everyone could take a moment and check your email for that. And so I believe that's also from Sandy. So for the record, I believe we have a second comment from the same individual parent. But thank you very much, Sandy, for emailing us. Another thing that I also want to be mindful of is that although we can certainly inquire about the use of portables and how they're used, the direction of using more would be outside of what the purview of our committee is. It's still a really good question. I just want to make sure for our legal team that's here that we do recognize that a direction like that would be outside of the purview of our committee. So to keep us a little bit focused as we come up here on the hour, are there any other thoughts about the structure of the options? Any ideas that you perhaps have? Because again, today is just a discussion. Things may be retooled, additional data points could be shared for the benefit of the community in terms of distances, so that instead of thinking or assuming how long something would be, maybe we can get some additional information and directly answer those questions. But outside of what we've discussed, is there anything else like foundational that you see here or that you might be interested in seeing in terms of other options?
Yeah, I'm wondering, since all of the pushback is on high school kids within the North Valley's walk zone now, if there's an option that could be made that keeps those students in North Valleys at their current elementary and middle schools, but moves all of the rest of the kids south and east of there into Allen or Bennett and the Desert Skies and Hug verticals.
Okay, we'll note that comment. So just for the point of clarification, I'm going to go to the slide that I think captures that. You're talking about, sorry, there's so many. That upper area that, like, for example, on slide 9, the upper area where that first neighborhood is.
Ladera Ranch on the right, yeah.
So it's the, yeah, okay, thank you, Adam. That's what I was referring to. So
Yeah.
Your curiosity is what it would look like if that area stayed. It would have to stay with Alice Smith and O'Brien and then North Valleys. So that would, so the curiosity is about what it looks like.
Numbers wise, if it still helps enough, because all of the pushback is about the high school walk zone and not being bused from close to North Valleys to a school, even a new school, a nice school that's way less convenient for families is what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's definitely a good curiosity to raise. You know, outside of the process, we can see what the district team considers with that. But we do know that anyone that is not, that does not move out would increase the numbers that we have here. And that's not an opinion one way or the other. It's just kind of approaching it from an analytical standpoint. We know that we're looking at any of the rezoned options still leaving North Valley's high school at, you know, 101, 102, but how much does that affect it? I understand the question that you're asking.
Hey, Beth, this is Randy Baxley, school planner, the one, the keeper of the numbers here. I can answer that question a little bit. In terms of Ladera Ranch, that's a newly developing subdivision. There really aren't a whole lot of kids there right now. When I ran the enrollment numbers, for all of Ladera Ranch, there's only 22 students right now covering all three levels, 11 elementary, 4 middle, and 7 high school students in that area. We're pretty much, the impact of Ladera Ranch, this is a developing subdivision, that's off into the future projections. So, you know, where we do something different with the Ladera, it's not going to change the overall numbers all that much as far as current numbers go.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that. And I was trying to listen, I think maybe with a little bit of feedback. But from what I understood with what you said with the relatively lower numbers now, if that area is built out the way that it's planned, which based on slide 6 is 332 single family homes, that impact would obviously be different in the future.
That's correct, yes. Because I mean, you know, if you look at the chart, you know, it's going to be further off to the right side, you know, the further years where, you know, changing Ladera Ranch will change the numbers more.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have any like foundational comments that could possibly be considered as the district team revisits this for future conversations? Seeing none of that, again, this is not the type of item where we make a vote, but we just make sure that all of our comments are shared. Doesn't mean that this is your only opportunity. As our committee members know, they can reach out to myself and Lauren and share any additional thoughts that you have. I mean, you're always welcome to do that. But if I see no other comment, we'll go ahead and we will close this with a brief pause. I do want to make sure that no additional public comment has come in before I officially close this agenda item.
There are 2 more, one from each of the people who've already written to us. And the parents asking if she has the option to choose. And then I think we talk about the grandfather variances, depending on what grade level her students are. And formally, our liaison would get back to folks about their specific questions. So maybe Lauren's doing that now. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, good. And then another comment was that there are walking and biking paths that aren't on Google Maps that we can't really, as you know, casual users of the maps, determine exactly how kids are getting to school if they're on foot or on bikes, which is a good point.
Tamala, do we have anything else from an official standpoint that you'd like to share from public comment? I believe it's normally traditional, Sarah, jump in here if I'm not correct, but we usually say the name of the commenter. So I would like to just make sure that we do that for the record and accurately. Tamala, are you able to help us with that?
Yes, we received additional comment from Sandy Guerra.
Okay. Well, thank you. On that note, we will go ahead and we will close out that item, which is item 2.02. And we will move on to section 3, which is our closing public comment. Is there any closing public comment?
There is not.
Okay. Well, then it is 6:40 p.m. and we will call today's meeting to a conclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you to the public and community for watching. Thank you to the committee. We appreciate you attending.